Dear viewers, I hope you will support us with simple subscribing our channel. Also like, share, and comment, and tell me from where you are watching this video. Return the 50,000, or don't bother coming home. My father's voice thundered through the bank lobby, his finger stabbing the air in my direction as if I were some criminal cornered in broad daylight, while my sister leaned in close, her words slicing sharper than glass. You stole Mom's money. We all know it. In that instant, the world froze. The drone of fluorescent lights, the tap of keyboards, even the sound of my own breath seemed to vanish. I didn't yell, didn't defend myself. I simply smiled, opened the folder I carried, and laid the teller's slips on the counter one by one, watching the blood drain from their faces as the truth stared back at them. And right there, in the busiest place in town, my own family tried to bury me alive under a lie. My name is William Carter, and this is my story. It's not easy to share, but before I open it up, I'd love to know you're here with me. Drop a hi in the comments or tell me where you're watching from, because sometimes just knowing someone is listening makes the weight lighter to carry. Thank you. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. And if my story resonates, please hit subscribe, because to someone who's had to fight just to be heard, that small gesture means the world. The Pacific Coast Highway stretched ahead like a ribbon pinned to the cliffs, fog rolling in heavy from the ocean, swallowing the horizon and spitting salt across my windshield. Every now and then, a lone gull cut through the gray sky, its cry sharp and empty. My grip on the wheel tightened as my eyes flicked to the pumpkin pie riding shotgun beside me, one I had baked myself with nutmeg, maple syrup, and a whisper of orange zest. Not just dessert, but a peace offering, a fragile reminder that even after drifting away, I still wanted to belong. The Carter house looked the same as every November. The front windows glowing warm against the damp night, paper turkeys Sarah had taped up years ago, still hanging crookedly, stubborn against time. The moment I stepped inside, the rich scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon candles wrapped around me. Mom, Linda, was bent over the stove, her shoulders curved, apron dusted in flour, while my father, Thomas, already sat at the head of the table, stiff as a general awaiting battle. Daniel lounged back in his chair with that smug ease of someone who never feared suspicion, and Sarah fidgeted beside him, tugging at her ponytail, her eyes darting like she already knew a storm was coming. I carried the pie into the kitchen, forcing a hopeful smile as I set it down gently on the counter, trying to bridge the distance. For a fleeting moment, it almost felt like home, until my father rose, his voice slicing the air like a blade. Return the 50,000, or don't come back. Daniel's fork froze midair. Sarah's lips trembled before she spit venom. You took Mom's money. We all know it. At first, I laughed reflexively, because surely it was a joke, but no one joined me. Daniel's gaze never left his wine glass. Linda twisted her napkin so hard her knuckles turned white, and she couldn't bring herself to look at me, not once. That silence cut deeper than the words. Thomas's glare stayed locked on me, unyielding. You're the one who set up her online banking. Who else could it be? The kitchen air thickened until breathing felt impossible. The oven's hum roared in my ears, the turkey smell soured, and the weight of their eyes crushed me. I set the pie tin down harder than I meant, the clang ringing sharp and final. Then pulled my leather jacket off the chair. No one moved. No one stopped me. No one asked me to stay. Only my father's voice followed me out the door. You have until Monday. If the money isn't back, we'll press charges. Santa Cruz blurred past as neon from the boardwalk smeared into fog, cotton candy sweetness drifting like a ghost of childhood I no longer recognized. By the time I checked into a rundown beachside motel, the pie, the accusations, the betrayal had already hardened into one truth. My family had convicted me without trial. The room smelled of salt and mildew, wood paneling stained from years of damp, a flickering neon sign outside painting restless light through thin curtains. I sat on the edge of the bed with my laptop, my hands still shaking but no longer from fear, and opened a blank document, typing the first words of a new case file. If I was innocent, then who had the chance, the motive, and the means? I named the folder Carter case, because for the first time, I wasn't investigating a client. I was investigating my own blood. Morning arrived heavy with fog. Motel coffee tasted burnt but was swallowed black as I stared at the cracked veneer of the desk where my laptop hummed. Pulling out a notepad, I began building a checklist like I had for countless financial crimes before: bank statements, login logs, teller slips, signatures, a timeline of Mom's hospital stay. I knew exactly what I was looking for, because I'd worked these cases for years. And the irony wasn't lost on me. After all that time protecting strangers from fraud, I was now forced to protect myself from the people I called family. The first call I made was to John Harris, my colleague back in San Francisco. Reliable, sharp, and cautious. I told him I needed data pulled from Coastal Trust Bank. He didn't ask why, just said, "Send me the account details." Give me a couple hours. 2 hours later, the files dropped into my inbox, and my chest tightened as I opened them. 3 withdrawals, $20,000 on October 5th, $15,000 on October 10th, and another $15,000 on October 15th, all in person at the Santa Cruz branch. My breath caught. They hadn't been online transactions at all. Yet, Thomas had stood in that kitchen and sworn it was the online banking I set up that caused the loss. Their story didn't match the facts. I scrolled through the login logs, and the first access after I left Santa Cruz weeks ago didn't come from my laptop. It came from the family's tablet, the one that never left the living room. The IP address matched their home Wi-Fi, the same one Sarah used for Netflix, and the one-time passcode hadn't gone to my phone. It had been rerouted to a backup email tied to Daniel's number. My stomach sank, not with fear this time, but with a cold clarity. Both Sarah and Daniel had access, and both had motive. Memory surfaced uninvited, Sarah rolling her eyes when Linda bragged about my promotion, sneering, "Oh, look at Mr. San Francisco Big Shot," or Daniel muttering that I was showing off when I gifted Linda a cruise ticket for her birthday. Tiny comments I had brushed off at the time, now sharpened into knives of resentment. I jotted notes into my file, circling their names, and knew I needed visual proof, cameras, teller slips signed by hand, something they couldn't wriggle out of. I called the bank directly to request access to the footage, but the manager stonewalled me, citing privacy laws. My frustration surged, but John messaged later that night, "Give me until midnight. I might get you still frames." I leaned back in the chair, staring at the blinking cursor on the screen. The folder now held more than data. It held my survival. I typed one line across the top, "This family wanted a thief. If they insist it's me, then I'll prove who the real ones are." At 11:47 p.m., my email chimed. John's subject line was blunt, "You're going to want to see this." I clicked, and when the first image loaded, my heart stopped. The images appeared slowly, grainy stills from the bank security feed, each one timestamped and marked with a teller station number. My pulse quickened as I clicked through them one by one. October 5th, a figure in a baggy green hoodie and oversized sunglasses stood at the counter, head tilted just enough for the camera to catch the ponytail slipping out the back. The way she held the pen, the slight tremor in her wrist as she signed the withdrawal slip. It was Sarah, my sister, hiding in plain sight with our mother's ID. I zoomed in on the signature, messy and uneven. It was Mom's name, but the handwriting was off, lacking the fluid loops Linda always had when she signed her checks. Next frame, October 10th, there he was, Daniel, in a polo shirt, leaning casually on the counter like he'd known the teller for years. He wasn't nervous. He was joking with the clerk, smiling like he owned the place. His signature on the slip was firm, almost cocky, the same way he always scrawled his name on receipts when we were kids. October 15th, again, the hoodie, again, the oversized sunglasses, same ponytail, same posture, but this time the signature was stronger, closer to Mom's usual hand, like Sarah had practiced. I pulled out a sticky note I had saved years ago from the fridge, Sarah's scribble that read, "Buy milk Sarah," and held it against the screen. The downward stroke, the loop on the S, it matched. The weight of it sank in. This wasn't one sibling acting alone. They had taken turns, Sarah testing her nerve, Daniel breezing through like it was nothing. They weren't just stealing. They were working together. And the scapegoat they had chosen was me. I opened another folder of notes and scrolled through reminders of what I knew. Sarah had complained about her credit cards, maxed out and bills piling up. Daniel had been bouncing from one job to the next, always short on steady pay, always brushing off questions with his easy smile. Both of them had grown tired of living in the shadow of my career in San Francisco. Now, with Mom's savings in their hands, they had turned their jealousy into action and pinned it all on me. I sat back in the creaky motel chair, the grainy images glowing from my laptop, and rubbed my eyes. Part of me still wanted to deny it, to believe they couldn't sink that low. But the evidence was too clear, the bank slips, the signatures, the footage. They all pointed in the same direction. And just as I exhaled, a notification pinged from my work email, breaking the silence. Compliance was tightening their watch on any outside inquiries related to Coastal Trust Bank. My company had just launched a major case against them for mishandling elder accounts. If I pushed too far with my personal digging, I risked crossing the line into a conflict of interest. Losing my job on top of everything else wasn't just possible, it was likely. I closed the message and sat frozen for a moment, feeling the walls close in. I stared at the folder on my desktop labeled Carter Case. The irony twisted in my gut. I had built my career defending the vulnerable from exactly this kind of exploitation. Now my own family was turning me into the criminal. If I backed off, I'd be ruined by their lie. If I pressed forward, I might lose the career I had built to protect the truth. I pulled the documents together, the teller slips, the video captures, the login records, Mom's hospital timeline. I stacked them neatly into the black presentation folder I'd carried into courtrooms before. This time, though, the courtroom would be the bank lobby, and the jury would be my own family. I ran my hand across the cover and whispered to myself, if the truth can save me, it will be here, laid out for them to see. No more hiding. Saturday night in the motel felt heavier than the fog outside. I had papers spread across the bed and the rickety desk, every inch covered in highlighted slips and scribbled notes. Beyond the thin walls, the ocean churned steady, a reminder that something larger was always pulling at the edges. I had everything I needed to show what really happened. But the part that gnawed at me was what came next. Would Mom see what I saw, or would she still look at me like the guilty one? My phone buzzed. A message from Sarah: if you have any dignity left, return the money before Monday. The words felt rehearsed, like she wanted to etch them into my conscience. A few minutes later, my father's name lit up the screen. His voice was ice: if this isn't resolved, I'll call the police, and I'll have the lawyer draft papers first thing Monday morning. He hung up before I could answer. Later that night, I played a voicemail from Mom. Her voice shook, softer than I'd ever heard it. William, if you did this, please just admit it. I don't want to believe it, but your father, he's so sure. Please, just make it right. The line clicked dead. That silence afterward was the loneliest sound in the world. They had all chosen their side. I was the one left in the dark, carrying proof no one wanted to see. I pulled the newest batch of documents John had sent me into focus. Buried in the bank's records was a line item that caught my eye, a short-term transfer routed through a company my father had dealt with in the past. It wasn't large, not compared to the missing $50,000, but enough to raise a question. Did Thomas know more than he was admitting? Was he complicit in looking the other way, or had he let himself believe the story his favorite children spun because it was easier than facing the truth? Another email arrived, this one with a scanned document attached, a draft of a financial power of attorney listing Sarah as Mom's designated agent. The signature line was incomplete, left hanging like an unfinished plan. My stomach clenched. They weren't just stealing cash. They were angling for long-term control over everything Mom had. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment betrayal. It was strategy, calculated, and cold. I leaned back and closed my eyes, letting old memories wash over me. Sarah, twirling in a new dress Mom had splurged on, even when money was tight. Daniel, praised for mowing half the lawn while I was scolded for spending too much time on my studies. My ambitions were called excessive, my successes a burden. I had grown used to being the outlier, the one who didn't quite fit the family mold. Now I saw how that distance had made me the perfect scapegoat. The folder sat heavy on the desk, black and unyielding. This wasn't just about $50,000 anymore. It was about a family rewriting history to push me out, to strip me of belonging, to erase me from the story of who we were. I stood and paced the length of the room, the smell of salt water drifting through the cracked window. No more silence. No more waiting for them to decide what version of me to believe. Monday, in the bright lobby of Coastal Trust, I would lay everything on the counter. Whatever pieces shattered after that would be theirs to gather, not mine. The video call with my firm flickered to life just after sunrise. My manager and 2 compliance officers stared back at me from a glass-walled conference room, their faces flat and careful. One of them went first, voice clipped, "William, we're tracking activity tied to Coastal Trust Bank that overlaps with our open investigation. Explain why your credentials are anywhere near this." My mouth went dry. I kept my answer tight, a personal matter intersected with the bank. I have not accessed any restricted systems or misused privileged data. My manager leaned forward, "Be specific about the personal matter." I stared into the camera, feeling the motel's stale air lift from the heater vent. I can't share private family details, but I will not compromise the firm. If necessary, I'll recuse myself from any internal access related to Coastal Trust. Compliance made a note. Another officer spoke without looking up, "You are on a short leash. If we see any indication of you pulling internal files for a personal dispute, HR will open disciplinary proceedings, including suspension without pay." The call ended with a soft chime, but the echo of it rang through my chest. It wasn't just my family on one side and the truth on the other anymore. My nameplate on an office door was suddenly part of the balance. If I failed to clear my own name, I'd lose the people who raised me and the work I bled for. The pressure doubled, a hand pressing on either side of my ribcage. I texted John, "I need boundaries in writing. I'll use only the documents Mom could request as a customer and whatever you can route through their consumer process. Nothing internal." His reply landed fast, "Good. And one more thing, don't just dump evidence on them. Build the narrative. Connect the dots in a way a stranger would understand it in 60 seconds. The truth doesn't walk into a room and win. Someone has to carry it there." The advice landed square. I spread my printouts across the motel desk again and forced myself to imagine I knew nothing about us. A family in Santa Cruz. A mother who trusted her children. A son accused because he happened to be the one who understood the app. A pattern of cash withdrawals that never touched the app at all. Handwriting that strained to look like appearance. A backup email and phone number not belonging to the accused. It was there. The story was already telling itself. I just had to make it unmistakable. I still needed motive anyone could grasp. Numbers have a way of speaking plainly. I pulled the soft credit pulls I could legally request and then the public records that required no special clearance. That's when I saw it. Daniel's revolving balances near $30,000, floating close to their limits and churning with interest. Dates and minimum payments lined up like fence posts, the kind you can't squeeze past without paying. That amount lived right next door to the missing funds. I set the report beside the teller slips with a sick, steady calm. Daniel had always laughed off money trouble as if it were a quirk in identity. Debt has a personality, but debt is not a joke when you start measuring the distance between a due date and the front door of your mother's bank. Anger came in a pulse and passed just as quickly, leaving a colder ache behind. This was the guy who taught me to ride a bike on the cul-de-sac, who used to put an arm across my chest in the passenger seat when he braked too hard. I had looked up to him even when I stopped admitting it. Now, his signature sat beside my mother's name on a slip he had no right to sign. The next question was the one I hated most. If I pulled the pin on this, if I laid out every document in front of Mom, what would be left of her when she realized it wasn't a stranger who had emptied her account, but two children she'd loved loudly and without condition? The thought of her face folding in on itself made me close my eyes and lower my head into my hands. But the alternative was to let her live inside a lie where I was the thief. That too was a kind of violence. I stood and began to assemble the black presentation folder like I would for any court briefing. Left side, copies of teller slips with dates circled in red pencil. Right side, still images from the bank cameras, each labeled with the corresponding slip. Behind them, login logs showing the tablet's IP and the backup email routing to Daniel's number. Then, the hospital intake forms that placed Mom under observation, the same window Sarah slept in her room and had access to her purse. And at the back, the soft credit report showing Daniel's balances and payment pattern. I slid the draft financial power of attorney into a clear sleeve all its own. Sarah's name staring up like a signature waiting for a pen that never came. I zipped the folder shut and rested my palm on the cover. Monday wasn't a meeting anymore. It was a threshold. I whispered to the empty room, on Monday, the truth goes on the counter. If it breaks us, but it won't break me. I slept in short pieces, waking to the sound of the ocean dragging white noise across the shore. At dawn, I ironed the shirt I'd packed, combed my hair with a motel's thin plastic comb, and stared at the old mirror until my face looked like someone I recognized. I tucked the folder under my arm, the way I would carry a fragile instrument. As I locked the door, my phone buzzed with a last message from John, "You've got this. Speak to the facts. Then let the silence do some of the work." I slid the phone into my pocket, took a breath salted with morning fog, and stepped into the day that would either repair my name or strip it bare. Coastal Trust Bank gleamed under a pale sheet of winter sun. The lobby smelled faintly of polished stone and printer ink. Through the glass, I could see a line of customers, a cluster of staff in navy blazers. And at the far side, my family gathered around a side counter, an island built for private disputes that always seemed to draw a crowd. Thomas saw me first. He straightened, jaw locked, and pointed as if he were calling a play, "Pay it back now, or don't come home." His voice carried, heads turned. Sarah's mouth tightened into a line. "You're a thief," she said, louder than she needed to, as if volume could make a thing true. Daniel stood with his arms folded, chin tipped just high enough to read his confidence. I didn't look at any of them yet. I set the folder on the counter and turned to the branch manager, who had been hovering with a trained smile. "I'm here to review my mother's recent withdrawals. She's present. This can be handled as a customer issue." He lifted a hand, palms out. "We take privacy seriously. Without a court order, we can't release any surveillance or internal records." I met his eyes. "I'm not asking you to release anything. I brought copies that were obtained through appropriate channels for customer remediation. And my mother is right here." I glanced at Mom. She was smaller than I remembered in the lobby light, hands worrying the strap of her purse. Thomas slid a sheet of paper across the counter like a winning card. "We don't need your theatrics. Look here," he said to the manager, tapping a printout. "There are online logins. That's a digital signature. Only he set up the app. Only he could do that." The manager nodded vaguely, as managers do when they want a scene to end. Sarah's eyes flashed, ready to pounce. Daniel smirked toward the floor. I felt the familiar urge to defend myself with speed and volume. Instead, I took John's advice and let the moment breathe. "Mom," I said quietly, "may I show you something?" She didn't speak, only gave the slightest nod. Her hand shook. I opened the folder and placed the first photocopy down, the teller slip from October 5th. "This is not an online transaction," I said gently. "It was a withdrawal at this counter. See, it has a teller number. And this is the signature." I slid a note Mom had written me years earlier beneath it, the curves and loops that belonged only to her. "Now look at the way this one strains at the end, like it's wearing a costume. That isn't your hand." Sarah breathed through her nose. "Anyone can fake uncertainty in a signature. He could have made that." I laid the still image from the camera next to the slip, a green hoodie, big sunglasses, the hint of a ponytail. The pen held like it might bite. "This was taken at 2:14 p.m., the same minute your account shows the withdrawal. Mom, you can see the counter. You can see the teller station number. You can see the person holding your ID." Daniel snorted. "Grainy pictures don't prove anything." I set down the slip from October 10th, then the still frame from the same time and teller, Daniel at the counter, shoulders loose, mouth mid-joke. His signature, confident, thick pressure at the downstroke, sat beside it. "This one," I said, "doesn't look uncertain at all." The room shifted. The manager took a small step closer. A customer at the next counter pretended to fill out a deposit while watching every move. I turned another page. Here are the login logs. The first access after I left Santa Cruz came from the family tablet on your home Wi-Fi, the one in the living room. The one-time code was sent to a backup email connected to Daniel's phone number, not mine. Thomas's mouth opened, then closed again. He looked at Daniel, then at Sarah, and for the first time, his certainty faltered. I slid out the draft financial power of attorney, Sarah's name typed neatly where the agents would be. The signature line was empty. "This was filed as a draft," I said softly. "It shows intent to shift control of Mom's accounts to someone who is not Mom." Linda made a small sound I had never heard from her before. Her fingers slipped from her purse strap and curled into her palms. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't point. I placed the last document on the counter, the credit profile with Daniel's revolving balances hovering near 30,000. "This," I said, tapping the dates, "explains urgency. Payments due. Interest climbing. The missing funds line up right beside this need." Daniel's composure cracked. "So what? You're fine. You live in the city and make more than any of us. Mom would have been okay." I looked at him, then at Sarah. She wouldn't have been okay. Not with her savings emptied by her own children. Not with her trust used as a tool. Thomas finally spoke, but his voice was lower, stripped of its edge. "I saw the online login. I thought that meant." I said, "It meant a code went to a phone that wasn't mine." I turned to Mom. "It never meant me." She blinked hard, tears standing but not falling. "Is it true?" She asked no one in particular, eyes moving from Sarah to Daniel and back. Neither of them answered. The quiet in that moment felt like the ocean pulling back before a wave. The manager, now invested, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Carter, if you wish, we can start a formal process to document unauthorized withdrawals and refer this for further action. We'll also review teller procedures from those dates." Linda nodded once, barely. Thomas looked at the papers again and said nothing. Daniel stared at the floor, jaw tight. Sarah's eyes shone with anger that didn't know where to go anymore. I closed the folder. The sunlight through the glass found the edge of its black cover and traced a thin line of brightness across it. I didn't feel triumph, just a steadiness I'd been missing since Thanksgiving. I looked at my parents and said, "I didn't come here to humiliate anyone. I came because I won't live under a story that isn't true." Then I stepped back, leaving the documents on the counter like a mirror no one could move. If the truth was the only weapon I had just set it down where it couldn't be ignored. And if it cut, it would cut where the wound already lived. The lobby had gone silent the second I placed the black folder on the counter. For a moment, the only sound was the steady scratch of a teller's pen behind us, filling in numbers on a form. Every eye, from customers waiting in line to the branch manager standing uneasily nearby, drifted toward me, and then to my family. I unclasped the folder and drew out the first set of papers. "These are the withdrawal slips," I said, laying them flat so the ink signatures caught the light. 3 transactions, October 5th, 10th, and 15th, 2015. Now look at the signatures. I pulled from my pocket a scrap of Sarah's handwriting from the kitchen notepad. The loops and slants told their own story. Compare this to the slip from October 5th. That's her hand. And this, I said, sliding another beside it, is Daniel's. Same pressure, same strokes as the receipts he signed his whole life. Sarah's skin went pale, color draining, as if the truth itself had reached up and snatched it away. Daniel stiffened, his arms unfolding. Thomas leaned forward, jaw tight. "All of this can be forged," he barked. "Anyone could have put these together. I let his words hang, then placed down the images, still frames pulled from the cameras above these very counters. On the first, Sarah in her green hoodie and oversized sunglasses, head bowed, hand trembling with a pen. On the second, Daniel leaning on the counter in a polo shirt, grinning at the teller like he had nothing to hide. On the third, Sarah again, same hoodie, different glasses, the act a little smoother. The manager frowned, leaned in, and nodded slowly, yes, those are the customers who presented the IDs on those dates. His confirmation rippled through the small crowd behind us, a murmur of disbelief. I wasn't finished. I opened another sheet. Here are the login logs. First access after I left Santa Cruz came from the tablet in the living room, same Wi-Fi you stream Netflix on. The one-time code was delivered to a backup email tied to Daniel's number, not mine. Thomas's eyes flicked from me to Daniel and back again. The certainty he had carried into this lobby faltered. His jaw moved, but no words came out. I turned another page and slid a photocopy of the draft financial power of attorney across the counter. This was never completed, but it was drafted to make Sarah the agent over Mom's accounts. This is not just about one withdrawal. It's about control. Linda gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, tears brimming instantly as she whispered in a breaking voice, "My children, you were planning to steal my future." Sarah shook her head with wide eyes and a cracking voice, insisting she wasn't, that she thought it wasn't serious, that she was only trying it out. But I didn't look at her. Instead, I laid down the last piece, a soft credit profile showing Daniel's debts and balances climbing near $30,000. This was why, I said firmly, the missing funds matched almost exactly with the hole Daniel had been falling into, not mine. Daniel snapped back, his voice raw, "You make 6 figures in San Francisco. You could have let it go. Mom would have been okay." I stared straight into him without raising my voice. She would not be okay. Not when her savings were drained by her own children. Not when her trust was twisted into a weapon, and not when you decided I should be the one to wear the chains for it. Linda collapsed into a chair, sobbing into her hands. Thomas's shoulders slumped in silence. Sarah broke down in tears, and Daniel stepped back like a man cornered by his own shadow. I gathered the papers, pressed them into the folder, snapped it shut, and walked toward the door with a low, final voice. I didn't need their apology, because the truth already spoke for me. I left them in that lobby with the weight of what they had done. Sunlight cutting across the glass as the door closed behind me, then drove north until San Francisco's skyline rose out of the fog like steel teeth. At my apartment, I carried the folder upstairs without opening it. From that day forward, the family group chat stayed unread. Calls unanswered, holidays unmarked. One evening, a voicemail arrived, Linda's trembling voice caught between love and regret. "William, the house feels empty without you. I was wrong. Please forgive me." A few days later, a padded envelope slid under my door containing an old Halloween photo from 1998, me in an oversized Superman cape, Sarah in a tinfoil crown, Daniel in a cheap ninja mask, and on the back in Linda's handwriting, it said, "We didn't realize how much we'd miss you until you were gone." News drifted from Santa Cruz that Sarah and Daniel had both left the house. Linda had stopped speaking to them after the bank incident, and Thomas barely went out anymore, his voice and presence diminished. Yet, none of them spoke directly to me. I kept moving forward, pouring my pain into work, running free seminars at a community center in the Mission District, teaching older residents how to protect their finances, recognize fraud, and question suspicious charges, even when they came from family. After one session, an elderly man gripped my hand and told me, "I wish I had a son like you." Words that filled me with equal warmth and sorrow. Symbols of what I had lost surrounded me. The pumpkin pie recipe I once made for Thanksgiving became a monument to a broken tradition, and the black folder stayed unopened in my desk drawer, a scar in paper form. The ocean in Santa Cruz echoed in memory, both a reminder of solitude and a promise of renewal. In the quiet of my apartment, I admitted a truth sharper than any ledger. This wasn't the grief of death, but the pain of losing family while they were still alive, a living loss. They had chosen to believe I was a thief until I proved otherwise. And even then, the fracture remained. I no longer carried rage. I carried resolve. On Christmas Eve, while San Francisco glowed golden green with lights wrapped around lampposts and skaters circling the Embarcadero, I walked the pier alone with my coat collar turned up, whispering to myself, not with bitterness or triumph, but with steady clarity, I lost my family, but I found myself. And sometimes that is the only gift that matters. The night wind carried my words away, and for the first time in months, I let the silence feel like peace. If you've stayed with me until the end, thank you. Sharing this story wasn't easy, but sometimes the hardest truths are the ones that deserve to be heard. And if this touched you, if you've ever felt misunderstood by those closest to you, please subscribe. It may seem small, but it means more than you know, because it tells me I'm not alone and helps this channel keep bringing stories that matter.